Joining our conversation, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine, William Taylor, Vice President for Russia and Europe at the U.S. Institute of Peace. John Heilemann is back with us on set. Ambassador Taylor, please tell me what you're hearing from your friends and contacts in Ukraine about the fight, about the damage and the brutality of the attacks in Mariupol, and about this capital city bracing for impact.
So, Nicole, I am in touch with good friends, people I've worked with and stayed in touch with over the years. Worked a couple times. I've met people my first trip there, my first service there, and stayed in touch and have talked to them, of course, since then. They are grimly determined, Nicole. It is striking to talk to them about their decisions. And I've talked to people who have decided to stay, as you've indicated. Igor Novikov is a good example. President Zelensky is a good example. They've decided to stay. And a good friend of mine is now in the military. I mean, he was a civilian before. He decided to stay, to join the military, and take up arms against. He's staying. He put his family out to the west, and then came back and joined the army. So there are these decisions that are being made every day. There are others who have made it into Poland. And I had a good talk with one person who was with her daughter, and she's in Poland and is in touch with people staying in Kyiv. They've made these anguished decisions all the time. It is horrific. It is brutal. It's unconscionable what the Russians are doing to the Ukrainians.
Ambassador Taylor, I know I mentioned this last time you were on, but I'm constantly reminded of your impactful testimony in Donald Trump's first impeachment trial. And you described a country that's been at war for many years. And I wonder if you could just offer me your assessment of their military strength. I mean, the world seems so surprised by how well they're doing. But it seems that with an understanding of the fact that Ukraine has been at war in the Donbass for many, many years, that maybe we shouldn't be.
The reason we're somewhat surprised, Nicole, is that in 2014, when the Russians invaded the first time, when they first invaded Crimea and then invaded Donbass, the Ukrainian military was not in good shape. It had been hollowed out by the previous president, the previous pro-Russian Ukrainian president. It had been hollowed out. It was not able to withstand. It made some valiant, it pushed back valiantly against Russian regulars, but nonetheless, it was not in good shape. And exactly what you say, they've been fighting now. The Ukrainian military has been fighting for 8 years, fighting the Russians for 8 years, and they've developed now into a formidable force. We've seen it. So it is certainly not a surprise to the Ukrainians that they're doing so well. It is certainly not a surprise to the military, who understand exactly where they've come from and where they are now. They're the most battle-hardened army in Europe at this point. So they are proud of that. And my friend who has joined the military recently was not a supporter of President Zelensky in the beginning, and now he's very proud to be led by President Zelensky. So this is a motivated force, capable force, well-trained and high morale.
See, and these seem to be some of the contours that if the assessment that Vladimir Putin had some assumptions incorrect, all of this plays into it. The other thing seems to be, and this is a question, not an assumption that I want to make, that while there were plenty of people with a natural affinity for Russia, they are Ukrainians first, that perhaps Vladimir Putin underestimated Ukrainian nationalism. Is that a factor in your view?
Absolutely a factor. So President Putin, I am convinced, never met the man, but I am convinced he doesn't understand Ukraine. He may think of Ukraine in Soviet times, or he may even think of Ukraine in pre-2014 terms. But this is a different Ukraine. He has unified Ukraine like no other Ukrainian leader, and it is crystallized into, we call it a hatred for him, and a hatred for Russia, and a hatred for those Russian soldiers who are attacking Ukrainians. Yes, this is a strongly motivated people, military nation that is not going to give in. And President Putin doesn't understand that. He made a terrible decision, a blunder. It's going to be seen historically as a blunder for him to have made this intervention, this invasion, because he didn't understand. His understanding was so bad.
Ambassador Taylor, there's one other thing that's going on here, right? In addition to the fact that this is a battle-hardened Ukrainian military, it's also they are very well armed. They may not be as well armed as they could be, but there's a lot of arms flowing across the borders from the bordering NATO countries, from Poland, from non-NATO countries like Moldova. Below the radar, I mean, having been over there for the last 2 weeks, I think Americans in general are not as aware as they might be of how many arms are being pumped across from NATO. And so I guess I ask you this question. If it's the case that the United States and NATO are going to remain resolute in the notion that they're not going to do a no-fly zone, what more would you say they could do in a concrete way on top of what they're already doing to further the cause of the Ukrainian defense?
So there are other weapon systems that that are from the ground that can attack aircraft that could be provided. There are electronic measures that NATO can use against the Russian military, the Russian Air Force that is trying to jam the Ukrainian Air Force. There are those kinds of things. But you're absolutely right about the flow of weapons, flow of these Stingers that are anti-aircraft. Low aircraft are vulnerable to these Stingers, as well as, and you're showing the effects of these Javelins.
Yeah.
The Javelins were the ones that blew up that convoy. And if it comes to smaller units, the Javelins and the Stingers are very good for that. So those need to continue to flow in large numbers, not just from the United States, but from all over. That's what needs to happen.